Hi, everybody. It's Justin McElroy from Polygon.com. I'm joined by my brother in games and in life, in Earth, Griffin McElroy. Hi, Griffin.
Hi, how are you?
But it's not about you. Don't make this about you.
Geez.
We're here to talk with Pete Hines, is the VP of PR for BS, Bethesda software, Bethesda in general, but not just Bethesda. Hi, Pete.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I was good until Justin went on that unexpected tirade at the beginning of our interview.
Pete, this was the first year we saw a big press conference showcase, spectacular from Bethesda, and I think once we got to the end of it, we were all sort of left with the same question: where was Wet 2?
It is still percolating.
Is it really? Don't mess with me. Don't play with my emotions.
As far as you know. Hey, listen, I loved Wet.
We all did.
I'm not kidding, Pete. I thought Wet was awesome.
Our president into signing it because I thought those guys were great and they had an idea, and I played it start to finish. And other than the fall from the airplane sequence, which was crazy frustrating, I thought it was super fun and a lot of definitely worthwhile. I'd play a second one.
I love Wet, but we have a serious question. Is this like a once in a few years opportunity where you have such a big lineup of games, or is this something you are thinking about making an annual occurrence?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I honestly don't know the answer. You guys know we're not a publisher that shows up every year to E3 and says, here's our 20 games for 2015. We do a lot fewer and put a lot more oomph behind them, and so I don't know right now sitting here today what next E3 looks like. If it's a good idea and we think we have enough to talk about and show, we will. If not, I'm happy to go back to a booth and a booth only. I don't want to paint us into a corner where we did it once and we feel like we have to do it every year. So I like to take it as it comes. We'll see where we end up.
Did you know, like, you have to have known for at least a little while, a period of a couple of years, that you guys had this dubstep drop of a year coming where you can show off Doom, you can announce Dishonored 2, you can announce and show off Fallout 4. Have you guys known that the Star Wars were about to align? How long has this been in the works?
You know what? Honestly, I don't remember exactly when I first pitched the idea. It was, at least a year ago. It was probably longer. And to your point, yeah, we did kind of have an idea, particularly because of Fallout and Doom, that those two things were going to be at a point where not only could we talk about them, but we could show them in a pretty significant way. And then Dishonored 2 being where it was felt like, maybe we were not ready to pull back the curtain on that, but at least to include it. And then you got Battlecry and ESO just came out, and there was enough things that we felt like we could put together and not be sort of stretching it out and trying to make more of it than we had, but to kind of keep it moving and give everybody a taste of what we were up to.
How hard is it to keep people talking about the games that are coming sooner, or maybe some of the games that aren't as high profile, like Battlecry, for example, you mentioned? How hard is it to keep those top of mind with people when there are these huge beloved franchises that are getting big new entries? It's
a really good question, Justin. And honestly, like, Fallout 4 takes a lot of bandwidth from games across all companies, right?
Right.
It's just, it's great to see. And this isn't bragging. Like, I can pull up websites and see how much ink it's getting and how much people are talking about it. So if it's taking up space from everybody else, then clearly it has some kind of dominating presence in what it is that we have to talk about. And it is difficult to sort of juggle all of those things and keep people focused, but at the same time they're all different things in different stages. And so, like, Battlecry is free to play. Like, it's not going to require any commitment other than at some point convincing you to download it and give it a try. And if you like it, great. And if not, then I assume you're going to uninstall it and not play it anymore. So sometimes it's like, where are things at? Like, I don't have to worry about, am I trying to get you to pay attention to Doom or Fallout 4, because Fallout 4 is 5 months away and Doom is some number of months more than that. So it is a little bit of a balancing act. It is part of the reason why we waited so long on Fallout 4. We wanted to compress that cycle just so that we didn't feel like it was already getting long in the tooth and people are like, all right, enough. I want it to come out.
What was the rationale behind letting the Rad Roach out of the bag, if you will, a few days before the conference itself and making Fallout 4 official?
I was trying to stay one step ahead of everybody. So I figured if we announced the showcase, then everybody would assume that we were going to announce Bethesda Game Studios' next game at E3. And A, they would leave me alone and stop asking me. And B, they would never see it coming if we announced it before E3 because they were expecting us to do it at E3. So sort of giving them the showcase was well, this must be where they're going to reveal stuff. And then we could do something a little bit beforehand to kind of build on the excitement and catch them a little off guard, and then hopefully surpass their expectations on what we had to show at E3. And that was kind of our thinking, that, as far as what Todd and myself and folks on my team talked about trying to put together.
Todd showed off a lot of Fallout 4 gameplay footage during the press conference. So I feel like we actually know a lot about the game. We went from knowing nothing to actually knowing quite a bit. But since I haven't actually played it and gotten a feel for it, are there any lessons or things that you've learned from the past games since you guys made Fallout 3 that are going to influence Fallout 4? Because while I feel like Bethesda's games look fairly similar, I feel like the feel of them changes pretty dramatically from game to game.
It's a good question, and the answer is yeah, absolutely. I mean, in some ways, this is both a sequel to Fallout 3 as well as a sequel to Skyrim. Like, one is the last game that this studio made in the franchise, but the other is people know this studio for something they did more recently, even if it was in another franchise, and different things that game did that previous ones didn't. And so I think it's a combination of all that. I mean, they're all very similar in terms of lots of player choice, lots of interactivity, all of the items in the world are real items. And in this case, taking all of those items and now making them have value, right? That an empty bottle is no longer just an empty bottle. Now it's a source of glass. And if you need glass to build a scope, suddenly that empty bottle that you left on the floor in that house an hour ago becomes super important because you need it for some weapon mod that you're trying to make. So little things like that. And honestly, it's not little, it's a pretty big step forward in terms of not just having everything be tangible, but having it all be meaningful and allowing the player to do this real-time world building where you're not just buying a house and then, sort of stubbing stuff into it, but really building it yourself. Where do you want the light to hang? How do you want the walls to look? What furniture are you going to build for it? Is a pretty big step forward in terms of who do you want to be in this world and what do you want to spend your time doing it, because it's all completely optional.
I wanted to ask about that system in particular because it's obviously far more sophisticated than the Hearthfire expansion that we saw for Skyrim. I think that's what it was called, where you got to build a house and start a family and everything.
Sure.
It actually reminds me a lot more of this budding genre that is almost always on top of the Steam charts of these survival collection, base building games like Besieged and Rust and things along those lines. Was that an inspiration for you guys, seeing just this enormous popularity for that?
No, this was stuff that honestly was conceived of. Todd talked about how they started thinking about stuff they wanted to do after Fallout 3, and I know 3, 4 plus more than 4 years ago, he was talking about how much he wanted to do this thing where the items in the world were basically broken down into raw materials that could be then turned around and built into anything.
Man, he must have been so mad when Minecraft came out. I can't believe this.
No, actually, that sort of more than anything, Justin, it kind of proved look, people love this stuff. They don't actually care what the graphics look like. If you give people a big sandbox and say, how creative can you be? The answer is holy shit, you can't even imagine what they can come up with. And so this was in some ways inspired. It doesn't go completely crazy where you can't do this absolutely anywhere in the game, but there's all kinds of locations, big sections of the world where you can do this kind of stuff. And, it's a pretty cool opportunity to let loose player creativity and see what kind of stuff they can come up with. We showed some examples of things the team has built, but, you give fans a few weeks or months to do their own take on it. I can imagine it's going to be pretty crazy.
Taking place after the apocalypse, as it does, the Fallout series has always, run a razor's edge with being very grim, but it has always had this sort of winky take on the apocalypse, almost a fun, the world's over, let's have some fun with it.
It's the Vault Boy thing, right?
Yeah, right.
Always that kind of twinkle,
So but in the clip that Todd showed and in the trailer, we get to see some of the world before it sort of collapsed. Is there a worry? Because honestly, watching it, the sense that I walked away with, it felt like it almost ran the risk of being too grim. Being reminded of what the world used to be before this almost made the world that that Fallout actually lives in,
The funpocalypse.
the funpocalypse, feel a bit darker, like because you do see the world as it was before, like almost, it runs the risk of losing that.
Sure.
That
I see your point. Like there's probably something to that, but at the same time, like if you go back and play Fallout 3 and play the first part in the vault and then relive that experience of the door opening and kind of this idea that you have lived your entire life underground in this bunker and coming out into the sunlight for the first time and your eyes adjusting and seeing the world as it is, it's already a pretty amazing, impactful moment. And the idea was, well, what if we could give both the player and the player's character the context of how it used to be, right? Because the guy coming out of the bunker in Fallout 3 doesn't have that context. He was born there, he lived his whole life there. And so if you can, can you make it even more dramatic and emotionally impactful that to the player and the player character, it was just a minute ago that I was at home on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning with my wife and kid at home, blue skies and beautiful day out, and then the next thing I know, I'm emerging into that exact same world, and it is destroyed almost beyond all recognition. I think part of it was to give player more of that connection to what the world used to be like and how it must feel to then emerge and go home and see, what used to be your home almost unrecognizable.
Speaking of being in that same world again, can you talk about where Fallout 4 takes place, sort of like chronologically speaking, and will we see any characters from the last game return for this one?
It's 200 years after the bombs fall. So you start the game on the day that the bombs fall, and you emerge from the vault 200 years later. As far as characters from other games,
A follow-up question. If your character is like, well, just take a guess here, 230 years old, I don't think he's going to be able to do much adventuring. His bones are going to be super weak. He's going to get tired very easily.
I don't think Griffin understands.
The sprint meter is going to be like that big. Vitality is not going to be high. He's going to get poisoned very easily.
He's going to be scavenging the wasteland for calcium.
And that's actually our strategy for making sure the game has untold amounts of gameplay, is that you are moving at the speed of a 235-year-old man.
Cool.
You absolutely forever to get anywhere.
That's good. It'll make the world seem bigger because you'll move slower through it.
Exactly.
I wanted to ask you about Doom, which I actually had a chance to see at QuakeCon last year. You all were very particular about, hey, QuakeCon folks, you're going to be the only people to see this for almost a year, and
we pulled it off.
Yeah, you pulled it off, which is kind of amazing. You had snipers trained on the audience looking for people holding up their phones recording, which is
snipers that you know of.
It was very intense. Is it a relief to finally talk about Doom? It's had a really, really rocky, development cycle.
Sure.
Is it a relief to finally talk about it? And are we ever going to know like the full story of everything that went on in that game's development?
Which one do you want me to answer first? Yes, it's a big relief. No, you'll probably never know the full story. But the short version of it is like, weren't happy with the game that was being made, decided that it wasn't Doom enough and needed to be sort of thrown out and started over, and it did, and some folks left and some faces changed at the studio, but out of that change, which was not easy for those guys to go through, some amazing things have happened. Like id Tech 6 happened only because of those changes and sort of changing at the sort of technology and what are we going to build to support this game level. It brought in a lot of new blood and folks that we may not have ever recruited to come to id because those positions currently had somebody in, but it injected a lot of life into that project. And whether it's on the art side or the design side or the technology side, they've brought in some amazing folks and kind of built themselves back up, and I think have really hit their stride over the last year.
What is the metric for Doom enough? Because I've heard you say that talking about the development of the game before. Obviously, Doom now looks Doom as hell, right? Like it's based on what we've seen,
That's a Doom-ass game.
That's a Doom-ass game, right? What is like your metric for that?
Well, it's one of those things. Like it'd be a lot easier to answer that question if I just showed you the one version before, and you were like, oh yeah, this, like, what is this? Like, if it. You can probably close your eyes and imagine like a Call of Doom or a Battle Doom game, right? Where it starts to feel way too much like, wait, this feels more like it doesn't feel like Doom. Like it feels like I'm playing some other franchise with a Doom skin on it. And a lot of it was just that. It wasn't fast enough. the way that the demons worked, the visceralness of the combat, like all the stuff that you see with like the finishing moves and all of that wasn't part of it at all. Right? The combat was more disconnected. You almost found yourself taking cover at times and using things from other first-person shooter games, which again might be fine for them, but for Doom it just didn't feel right. The pace of the multiplayer was a little too slow, and it was a little too grounded, and so a lot of it was just like the feel of it. You watch it, or you get a controller in your hands, and like, how should it feel? How should the shotgun feel when it goes off? How should demons move? How big should they be? What should they look like? Even simple things like, where is it set? Is it set on Mars? Do you get to go to hell? All of those things.
If the answer to either of those was no, then yeah, go ahead and restart the development on that one.
There you go, Griffin.
Yeah.
Now you're starting to get
It's set in the forest in Portland, Oregon. It's not.
The Forest Moon of Endor, it turns out, is not a good Doom setting.
Sure.
Were you expecting the reaction of some people that felt like it was too violent, that were kind of put off by how violent it was? I mean, like, I understand. Let me rephrase. I understand you're not giving a shit. I mean, like, were you expecting people to be like, wow, video games, apparently you do still have the ability to gross people out?
I will say that it certainly wasn't intentional. It's not like a goal we set out to be like, ooh, we're going to be like edgy or controversial, or, you know, do more violence than people are prepared for, because that's what's going to sell copies. It was just, it goes back to the question Griffin was asking before, which is like, well, you know, how does it feel like Doom? And it's like, well, you inject some violence and you inject some combat, and it's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, this isn't really over the top. It needs to be a little bit more over the top. How do we do that? Like, well, I don't know. Like, what's the chainsaw doing? Like, can you stick it in a demon and saw them in half? Can you grab them by the head and rip them in two and see their spine sticking up? And it turns out you can do that, and it makes it pretty cool and fun. And if you're not into violent, bloody games, like, Doom's probably not a game for you. Like, I told my 11-year-old, like, you can watch the press conference, but you can watch the opening stuff, and then you can't watch any of the Doom stuff. And then you can tune back in. He's with my parents. Like, all right, you can let him tune back in and watch the other stuff, because even the Fallout stuff, other than Todd's terrible potty mouth, is, you know, is pretty fine for him.
That must have been...
Doom,
that must have been so hard for him watching his grandparents freak out to those gnarly kills. Like, hell yeah, did you see that? Did you see what he
tore
did?
his spine out of his butt. Oh, Brad.
Hell yeah.
but yeah, look, it's a game that definitely embraces over-the-top violence and tries to do it in a way that's fun. I mean, look, you're doing it to demons. If you were doing it to human beings in a very realistic setting, you'd have a very different take, right? We'd all be like, look, this is just like, it's kind of disgusting.
It would be a fighting game, and it would be called any Mortal Kombat game for like the last 3 or 4 years.
Basically. That's not what this is doing.
I want to also, I know we've been going for a while, but there's a lot to talk about. You guys have a lot of games. I want to talk about Dishonored 2, but I feel like there's not a lot we can talk about. Is that game pretty far off? Is it going to be a while before we get some really substantive stuff other than that totally dope trailer that we saw?
We're targeting spring of 16. Part of it was just, it felt like it was a couple of months before it was really ready to pull the curtain back next to Doom and Fallout. Part of it is also like, I didn't want to like hurry up and announce it pre-E3 or try to show it off next to these other 2 games. And now, kind of to your point earlier, Griffin, where you're like, now I've got, in addition to what everybody else in the industry is doing, now I got 3 games that are competing amongst themselves in my own showcase, and 2 of them aren't even coming out till next year. It felt like maybe a little bit too much at once. So I kind of pushed that one down the line a little bit in terms of when we want to show the gameplay and do, you know, a very similar demo to what you saw for Doom and Fallout 4, where you get to see a lot of the game.
So speaking of the smaller games that maybe people, you know, overlooked in the press conference, I do want to talk to you about the Elder Scrolls collectible card game, because I know that you are maybe one of the biggest...
I'll be over here.
Maybe one of the biggest Magic the Gathering fans in the entire games industry, and really all trading card games. Justin plays a lot of Hearthstone, so I don't know what he's doing over here, you know, feigning disinterest. Can you tell me anything about the Elder Scrolls CCG? Because obviously there's a lot of different types of
Right.
card games.
It's something we've been working on a while, since before we knew Hearthstone existed. We have kind of our own take on where it fits on the spectrum of strategy card games, where you've got, Magic the Gathering over at this end on like the super complicated, complex, like really deep, and then you've got some other stuff on this end where it's a little bit more accessible. And Hearthstone found this really great sweet spot for themselves where it's got some depth and it's got a lot of strategy, but it's also this really easy on ramp, and they're not doing crazy stuff like Magic is, where you've got mana bases and playing cards on your opponent's turn. And so we were really at the time, and I still think we are, aimed at a spot that we're pretty comfortable with on that spectrum, where it's not like overly simplistic, but at the same time it's accessible and offers a some new features, some stuff that quite honestly I don't see in other strategy card games. And we're pretty excited. We're working with Direwolf Digital, some guys out of Denver, who are pretty steeped in that. They've got when I got out there a couple of weeks ago, I got to nerd out as a Magic guy, because after we were done meeting, I got to do a Magic draft with, Luis Scott Vargas and Patrick Chapin. Both are in the Hall of Fame. Conley Woods, who's played on the Pro Tour and has won Pro Tour stuff. Matt Nass, who's played and won Grand Prix. Like really accomplished Magic guys working on our card game. Like it was a lot of fun to go toe to toe and just kind of talk strategy games with them.
I think it's a great idea for it's coming to mobile, right?
iPad and PC. Yeah.
I think it's a great idea for those platforms, and obviously you also stealth launched. Stealth launched is so much the best term, but surprise launched Fallout Shelter, which a lot of Polygon people have been playing around the office this past week. Have you given any consideration to the earlier Elder Scrolls games, Morrowind and before? Is that even feasible? We're seeing bigger and bigger games like Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic and bigger titles like that. Is that even a possibility for mobile and tablets?
It might be a possibility, but I don't think it's something that we've really seriously considered or talked about. We don't spend a whole lot of time going back through like old stuff and figuring out how to shoehorn it onto a new thing. Anything you do with Morrowind, for example, is going to require the guys at Bethesda Game Studios who made it to help be involved, because it's, they did all the coding and work for it. So am I going to distract from Fallout 4 to get this thing out on an iPad, or am I going to put more time and attention into Fallout 4 features and making that better? Well, if I'm Todd, I do the latter, and that's pretty much where their head is. We've certainly looked at an awful lot of stuff, back catalog stuff, new things that we could do with stuff like we're doing with Fallout Shelter. We've kind of considered everything, but I think we're going to sort of pick and choose carefully and place our bets behind stuff that we feel like we can do to a high quality and isn't kind of just retreading something old to sell a few copies.
Pete, I've been playing a lot of Fallout Shelter, and my question to you is there a chance that Bethesda is going to make so much money off of Fallout Shelter that they'll just stay where the money is on mobile and just shelve Fallout 4, shelve Dishonored 2, shelve Wet 2, and just stay where the money is on mobile?
No.
Okay, second question. I haven't gotten any Legendary Vault Dwellers yet. Pete, what's up with that?
You're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. See,
I've got a radio station. It's a huge radio station, upgraded, nothing. I'm buying the lunch boxes, buying them.
Yeah, but you don't want it bad enough. You gotta want it.
Don't you tell me how bad I want Legendary Vault Dwellers, Pete Hines. Pete Hines.
The question I have is, are you doing the straight up thing, or have you started doing vault experiments where you do wacky stuff like I did, where like you have one guy who makes all the babies and you have a vault that is basically, you do the Craster build, right? Because that's what the vaults are. They're socialist.
A cult vault, you're saying?
Yeah. No, we got to try different experiments. Like you throw out all the women except for one, and you see how long you can keep going with only one lady, or stuff like that.
This has been the incredibly disturbed Pete Hines. He is severely imbalanced. I'm happy to get him off our video, but we do appreciate him sharing his time.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Sure.
Good to see you.
And thanks to you at home for watching. We got a lot more stuff at Polygon.com, so go check it out right now.